that you hear what I'm saying, but do you truly hear what I'm saying?
Okay, without further ado, the voice of the Detroit Pistons. Let's hear it for Mr. George Blaha.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, great.
And how many people here want to be a sports announcer? Almost everybody, huh? And you know, there are, as everybody has told you along the way, there are a number of other jobs in broadcasting that are very, very challenging and very, very rewarding if you don't end up on the air. But if you've always wanted to be a broadcaster, and that's really a main goal of yours, then I would pursue it as long as I could. I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer since I was about 8, 9, 10 years old, and that's everything that I did really directed me toward that final goal. I did get an education, and I did get a fairly broad education, but I always kept my goal in mind that I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. Now, if you're a sportscaster, let's say you're on the air, you don't necessarily have to be a play-by-play announcer. You can be like Bernie Smilovitz, do the sports on TV, or like there's so many people now on ESPN anchoring sports coverage, introducing highlights, doing interviews, and all of those skills will keep you in the business, and in many cases probably pay you a lot of money. But I have to say this, as much as I love the entire business, probably if I wasn't doing play-by-play, I might be in another line of work, because this is what I love, and it would be hard for me not to do ball games. So with that in mind, I thought I'd open the floor for some questions, and in the meantime, I have some other things I want to pass along to you, but I don't want to miss any of your questions. On a game night, as you can imagine, we're pretty jammed in terms of what we have to do to get ready for the game. We thought Ryan Field was going to do this segment. I was going to do the next one, but all of a sudden we found out that he had things to do, so I'm up here to do this one, and he's been flipped to the next segment. He now is as you probably know, if you do watch Piston games, or Tiger games, or Red Wing games, he's on field or near the court or sideline. We call him reporter. So what he has to say about his business will be a little bit different from what I have to say. But who's got some questions? Let's fire away here. Yes, sir.
What did you major in?
From UD Jesuit. All right.
What did you major in college?
Actually, I majored in economics because Notre Dame, where I went to undergraduate school, didn't have a lot of courses in radio and television. Whatever courses they had, I took. And then my dad finally told me, God rest his soul, he just passed away recently. He said, you know what? Your business is such a difficult, competitive business that you're planning on getting into. You probably could use a real strong degree in some other area. If this didn't work, you could go in some other direction, and it might even help you in your business. So I got a master's degree in business after that. And then I took a short course in broadcasting, probably not as long as like the Specs Howard one, a shorter one. There was really a nice place called the Institute of Broadcast Arts that Ernie Harwell recommended to me. It only took like 6 or 8 weeks, and enough to give you a little practice and give you an audition tape that you could send out to a radio station to try and get a job, because the hardest thing in the whole deal is getting your first job. Because if you don't have any experience, they don't want to give you a job. Well, how are you going to get any experience if they don't give you a job? So you need at least to show up with a tape that shows that you have done this, whether you did it to get paid or not. And as a matter of fact, when I finished with this short course of broadcasting, I taped some games when Spencer Haywood was playing at the University of Detroit. Then I also went to a small radio station up in the Thumb, and for free did a few broadcasts for them, and had a tape, of course. And as a matter of fact, this was a daytime radio station, so on Friday night when they had a basketball game, the station wasn't even on the air. You taped it, and then they played it back on Saturday morning. So they say you got to start at the bottom, and I did. And that'll happen to you. Often, in fact, the smaller the place you start, the more experience you will get, because you get a chance to do everything. Yes, sir.
Mr. Blaha, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what do you like better, doing the state games or the Pistons games?
You know what? I'll tell you this. My two favorite sports are college football and pro basketball, or pro basketball and college football. So I'm really fortunate that I get to broadcast the two sports that the other sport I follow, but not quite as close, would be golf. And not that I don't pay attention to college basketball or pro football or baseball. I don't pay as much attention to hockey as I could if I wasn't, consumed by basketball at the same time of the year. But I'm really fortunate I get to do the sports that I love. As a matter of fact, it would be hard for me to leave either one of them. You say, well, when you're getting closer to retirement, maybe you should only do one of them. And I've said, I don't know if I could do that. It would be, during pro basketball season, it would be very hard for me not to be doing these games, and other way around if I got rid of football in the fall. But they're great games. I grew up with both of them, especially. I grew up in Iowa, so college football was really big out there. We didn't have any pro teams. Yes, sir.
You're a real busy man. How do you keep your pipes in shape? I mean, you're in Michigan State, you're in the Pistons. How do you do
Well,
it?
I think you got to be blessed a little bit, and then I lead the world in halls. I don't use it because I have a cough. I just use it to keep my throat kind of lubricated or whatever. But there's always one open. It's kind of gross during every game, and I'm always looking on the halls during a commercial break or something to make sure that I'm ready to roll. And they have a cough button too, so you can do that. Yes, sir.
How much preparation is there before a game as far as looking over stats and getting ready?
Well, the most difficult preparation is done before you play a team the first time. And I spent a couple hours a day in Milwaukee, but the first time we played them, I spent a full day probably. And sometimes there's so much information, you got to boil it down to what you want and you need. But as you can imagine, after all of these years doing it, I have a certain system that works for me. And should have brought a lineup card up here, but if 11 Monte Ellis, 6'4", 210, 8th year, Lanier High School, Jackson, Mississippi. But then I also have down there when he was drafted and by who he's played for. A couple of really, I think, hook kind of highlights about somebody's career. Like he's had 7 40-point games. That's pretty strong. Yeah, that'll make the airwaves tonight somehow. Yes.
Do you like doing radio or TV?
That's a great question too. I think in radio you get a chance to paint the picture, and in TV you kind of put words on a picture that everybody's already watching. So they're both very challenging and both a lot of fun. I think they let me be a little wordy on TV compared to some other guys. So that's why I'm happy doing television here. But like next Tuesday, the game's not on local TV, so I get to go down and do radio with my man Rick Mahorn, and that'll be fun. And I love working with Gregory Kelser on TV as well. But they're two slightly different animals, radio and TV. Yes.
Just a quick question. On a record-setting event or a milestone in a player's career, whether college or pro basketball, are you scripting that, or is that just all emotion?
Well, you probably really shouldn't script it, but you ought to think about it. And if it sneaks up on you, like the night Tayshaun got to 9,000 or 10,000 points, I was just flipping to the notes before, and he only needed 2 points. It was a good thing that I looked at that started.
Right.
But I'll tell you what we have now, that what I didn't have in radio, we have a great stat guy in the TV truck. So somebody said, Greg Monroe's played great against the Bucks. What did he average against the Bucks so far this year? Right away somebody got my ear 22 points, so I didn't have to look that up. Now, I would have, because I think it's important to know that, but I didn't have to look that up, for instance.
Your favorite broadcaster growing up as a kid?
Pardon me?
Who's your favorite broadcaster that you like to listen to as a
Oh,
kid?
another great question. Well, since I'm a lot older than you guys, I grew up, of the people around here, listening to Ernie Harwell, of course, and Ray Lane broadcast the Tigers, and Van Patrick, who at one time, Van Patrick, some of you have heard of, at least the dads and teachers, broadcast the Lion games. He actually did the Tigers before Ernie Harwell did, and he also broadcast Notre Dame football. Great announcer with big pipes and a great personality too. So those are a couple of guys around here that I pay close attention to. Nationally, probably Mel Allen and Vince Scully. Yes.
So when you decided you wanted to get into broadcasting, was it a gradual thing or was it a key moment to make you, wow, I really want to do that?
I think when I was young, I was such a sports fan, and if I wasn't outside playing ball of some kind, I was listening to games at night on the radio. There weren't as many games on television as there are now, not even close. And so I listened to an awful lot of broadcasters and realized, man, this would be heaven to be at those games and to be delivering the games to fans who care about them as much as I do. And the older I got, the more I realized that, you know, there are an awful lot of people in this great country who work very hard for their money, especially in a blue-collar city like Detroit, Pittsburgh, those kind of towns. And, you know, they finished a hard day's work. If you could be their entertainment, if you could be their escape, help them, whether it's a baseball game in the back porch in the summertime, and there was a time I wanted to be a baseball announcer. There wasn't as much opportunity then as there is now to get into baseball. There are a lot of minor league teams now, and a lot of minor league broadcasts. Or as the basketball announcer who helped fill up the cold winter's night with some games. So that's when I really decided this would not only be a career that I would like, but it might actually help entertain people and make them forget their troubles and think about the good times that their teams are having, you know, so. Yes?
George, can you name a couple of maybe the most influential people that helped you in your career or your mentors?
I think that when I reached out to Ernie Harwell in a letter telling him I wanted to get into broadcasting, and he directed me toward this Institute of Broadcast Arts, which was going strong in those days, that was certainly a help. The fact that he answered the letter, we didn't talk, but he answered the letter. Well, then when I got there, Van Patrick had some connection, and he actually spoke at the graduation, and since I was the guy who was of the group going through this broadcast training, who was most interested in being a sports announcer and a play-by-play announcer, he took a special interest in me, and so he was a mentor at that time. Then later, when I got a chance to finally get a job offer, I went to see Ray Lane, who was then working at Channel 2, and we had a great long conversation about the do's and don'ts about your first job. And he told me I had 3 offers: Rapid City, South Dakota, 29 Palms, California, and Adrian, Michigan. And he said, don't be enamored with 29 Palms, California. You don't want to get that far away from home. What if the boss isn't anybody you really want to work for? And he said, as a matter of fact, between Rapid City and Adrian, you ought to take Adrian, which was a great advice. Because for me, I never had to leave the state of Michigan. I went from Adrian to Lansing to Detroit, and then got the Pistons job, and I've lived happily ever after.
Excellent, thank you.